The scorching sun hovered high in the sky, casting its relentless gaze across the dry, undulating plains. Heat waves shimmered above the cracked earth, and the air smelled faintly of dust and parched grass. The rancher wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of a dirt-stained hand, squinting against the blinding light. The day had begun like any other. The cattle needed water, the fences needed checking, and the endless horizon promised nothing but routine. Yet, there was a subtle restlessness in the wind, a whisper that something extraordinary was about to happen. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. Each step through the rough terrain was measured, careful. His boots sank slightly into the dusty soil, leaving temporary footprints that the wind would soon erase. The rancher was a man of habit, one who had spent years alone with only the cries of hawks and the lowing of cattle for company. He knew the land intimately, the hidden streams, the rocky ridges, the places where snakes liked to slither, and the small pockets of shade beneath stubborn juniper trees. Yet despite this knowledge, attention had begun to creep into him, something beyond the ordinary caution of a rancher in the desert. It was a feeling, almost instinctual, that there was more today than work waiting in the heat. As he trudged forward, his eyes scanning the horizon for movement, a sudden sharp sound sliced through the monotony. It was a cry, high-pitched and filled with fear, carrying a desperation that instantly made his pulse quicken. His heart skipped a beat as he froze, listening. The sound was human, unmistakably so, yet strange in its timbre. A voice that trembled with panic but carried through the dry air with remarkable clarity. For a moment, the rancher considered ignoring it, telling himself it was some lost animal, maybe a coyote pup trapped in the brush. But the instinct that had kept him alive through years of isolation refused to let him turn away. Without hesitation, he dropped the water bucket he had been carrying and sprinted toward the sound. Each step was uneven, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust as he navigated the rocky ground. The cries grew louder, punctuated by faint sobs, and the rancher's chest tightened with urgency. His mind raced as he considered what might have happened. Perhaps someone had fallen from the cliffs near the ravine that split the plains here. Or perhaps there were children lost from a nearby camp. Whatever the situation, it was clear. He had no choice but to act. The terrain became more treacherous as he approached the source of the cries. Thorny mesquite trees jutted from the soil, their twisted branches scratching at his clothes and arms. Jagged rocks threatened to twist his ankles, and patches of dry, loose earth slipped beneath his boots. Sweat ran freely down his face, stinging his eyes, but he didn't slow. He had faced danger before, the occasional rattlesnake, a stampede of startled cattle, but nothing had prepared him for the raw, urgent fear in a human cry. Finally, he reached a small ravine, barely more than a dip in the earth, but deep enough to hide someone from view. There he saw them. Two young girls no older than 12 or 13 clinging to each other in the dirt. Their clothes were torn, smeared with mud and blood from minor scrapes, and their hair hung in damp, tangled strands around their dirt-streaked faces. They looked at him with wide, terrified eyes that seemed too large for their small, frail frames. Their lips trembled as they tried to scream again, but the sound faltered into gasps of panic. The rancher's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he had to act quickly. Without thinking twice, he lowered himself into the ravine, feeling the sharp rocks cut into his hands and knees. "It's okay," he said, his voice low but firm, hoping to soothe them. "I'm here to help. I won't let anything happen to you." The girls hesitated, uncertainty warring with instinct. Then, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, they allowed him to approach. Carefully, he guided the younger sister to his chest, cradling her as though she were a fragile bird. The older girl clung to his arm, her small hands gripping his sleeve with desperate strength. The weight of both on him was surprisingly light, yet the psychological burden pressed heavily. He had no idea who they were, why they were there, or what dangers might be lurking nearby. Every noise in the surrounding desert, the rustle of dry leaves, the distant call of a hawk felt amplified, threatening. He moved slowly, deliberately, ensuring that every footstep was sure and steady, the girl's safety paramount. Once they were out of the ravine, he set them down gently. The older sister's eyes searched his face, her fear mingling with a flicker of trust. The younger clutched at his shirt, refusing to let go, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Thank you," the older whispered, her voice hoarse, carrying a cadence that hinted at a language he didn't understand but somehow recognized as Apache. The rancher nodded, unsure of what else to say. focusing instead on scanning the horizon. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes, a quiet tension in the air that suggested they were not entirely alone. He considered the possibilities. Perhaps their family had been nearby, and they had wandered too far. Perhaps they had been fleeing some danger he couldn't yet perceive. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation, all while keeping the girls calm. "We need to find your people," he said softly. "Do you know where your home is?" The older girl shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes again. He realized the depth of the situation. These children were alone, vulnerable, and entirely dependent on him. As he led them toward a patch of shade under a lone mesquite tree, the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson. The rancher's thoughts shifted from immediate survival to what the next steps might be. He needed water, food, and shelter for them. But more pressing than that was the knowledge that by saving them, he had inserted himself into a situation that could bring unforeseen consequences. In a land where mistrust between outsiders and the Apache was known, the act of rescuing their daughters could be seen as interference, or worse, a threat. Despite the uncertainty, he refused to falter. There was a calm determination in his chest, a recognition that courage was not about the absence of fear but about moving forward despite it. He knelt down beside them, letting the girls rest while he searched nearby for a small stream. His eyes caught the glimmer of water trickling between rocks, a tiny salvation in the vast expanse. Guiding them carefully, he helped the girls drink, their small hands trembling as they cupped the water to their lips. Relief washed over him as he watched their fear give way, even if only slightly, to the simple comfort of hydration. As the first shadows of evening stretched across the plains, the rancher knew he could not linger. He had saved them from immediate danger, but the world around them remained uncertain. He glanced once more at the horizon, imagining the possibilities. Friends or family searching for them, hostile forces who might misinterpret his intentions, or the complex judgment of a tribe whose rules he could not begin to understand. Yet even as doubts gnawed at him, a quiet resolve took hold. He had acted because it was right, and no matter what came next, he would not abandon these children. The rancher's eyes met those of the sisters, now clinging to him not just out of fear but out of trust. In that moment, an unspoken bond formed, fragile yet powerful. It was a bond forged in desperation, in courage, in the raw, unfiltered moments of life and death. The desert wind carried a faint promise, whispering of challenges and choices yet to come, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was no longer merely a rancher tending his cattle. He was a protector, a guardian thrust into a story far greater than himself, and so, with the sun dipping toward the horizon and shadows stretching like long fingers across the plains, he led the girls forward, step by careful step. Each movement was deliberate, each breath measured, for the dangers of the world were no longer abstract. They were immediate, pressing, and entirely real. The first chapter of a tale that would change his life forever had begun, sparked by courage, guided by instinct, and driven by the fragile hope that goodness could survive even in the harshest of lands. The evening air was heavy, with the scent of dry earth and sagebrush as the rancher guided the two girls across the uneven plains. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the horizon with fiery streaks of crimson and gold. Shadows stretched across the dusty ground, twisting and lengthening in strange, almost eerie patterns. Despite the fading heat, the rancher could feel a chill creeping up his spine, not from the temperature but from the awareness that they were walking into unknown territory. Every crackle of dry twigs, every distant rustle of leaves, felt amplified in the hush of the desert dusk. The older sister kept a firm grip on his arm, her small hand clutching his sleeve with desperate determination. Her dark eyes, wide and unblinking, darted to every shadow and movement. She spoke in whispers to the younger one, words he could not understand, yet he caught the tone, soft, soothing, yet edged with fear. The younger girl's face was pale, smudged with dirt, and tears streaked her cheeks, drying in the wind. She occasionally glanced at him with an expression that was part gratitude, part uncertainty, as if trying to decide whether he was friend or stranger. The rancher moved cautiously, navigating the rough terrain and keeping his senses alert. He knew enough of the world to recognize the signs of danger in the wilderness. Broken. The landscape began to change as they moved deeper into the plains. The rocky outcroppings gave way to patches of scrubland, and the faint sound of a distant stream trickled into the air, barely audible. Birds called to one another in the distance, their cries sharp against the quiet hum of the evening. The rancher's instincts told him they were not alone. There was something almost imperceptible in the way the wind moved, a subtle shift that suggested unseen eyes watching them, evaluating their every move. He couldn't see them, but he felt them, silent observers in the fading light. Hours seemed to pass in the slow crawl toward safety. The rancher kept his mind alert, not just to the environment but to the girls' needs. He encouraged them to drink small sips from a canteen he carried, letting them rest whenever he could find patches of shade or slight depressions in the terrain. He helped the younger one step over rocks and brambles, careful not to startle her, mindful of how fragile she seemed. Each step, each small gesture was an act of reassurance, a silent promise that he would not let harm come to them. As twilight descended fully, the air became cooler, carrying the scent of distant pine and the subtle musk of the earth settling from the day's heat. The rancher noticed the girls shivering slightly. He draped his jacket over their shoulders, wrapping them as best as he could against the chill. They huddled together beneath the fabric, leaning against him, drawing warmth and security from his presence. It was in this moment, as the shadows deepened and the stars began to glimmer faintly above, that he understood the full weight of responsibility he had taken on. These children were not just lost, they were completely vulnerable, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. In the fading light, the faint outline of a camp appeared in the distance. Fires burned in small clusters, casting golden halos that danced against the encroaching darkness. The rancher slowed, raising a hand to halt the girls. He scanned the area carefully, noting the figures moving around the fires, adults, their movements deliberate and watchful. He realized that this was no ordinary gathering. It was an Apache camp, their traditional attire catching the firelight, their postures both proud and cautious. The rancher's heart pounded in his chest, and he felt a surge of anxiety. He had no idea how the tribe would receive him. To them, he was an outsider, a man who had suddenly appeared in their midst. He could be seen as a threat, a trespasser, or perhaps, if luck and fate were on his side, a savior. He knelt beside the girls, whispering in a low tone, "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say." The older sister nodded, her eyes flicking nervously toward the camp. The younger one clung to his side, hiding her face against his jacket. Step by careful step, he moved toward the edge of the camp, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He called out softly, hoping to bridge the gap between fear and understanding. The figures around the fires froze, heads turning in unison to watch him approach. A tense silence fell over the camp as he drew closer. The adult's eyes, sharp and unyielding, measured him with precision. He could see the faint glint of arrows at their sides, the taut strings of bows ready to be drawn if necessary. The rancher kept his hands visible, palms open, signaling that he meant no harm. He lowered himself slightly, bowing his head in a gesture of respect. The girls moved beside him, their presence both a shield and a plea. They pointed toward him, their expressions filled with hope and urgency, as if to say, "This man saved us. He is not the enemy." From the far side of the camp, a figure stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate, and commanding. The rancher immediately recognized him as the chief. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the dim light and look directly into the soul, the chief exuded authority. Every member of the camp seemed to defer to him, their postures straightening, their voices lowering. The rancher's pulse quickened. He had heard stories of Apache chiefs, men who were wise, courageous, and fierce. He had never imagined meeting one under such circumstances, with the lives of 2 children hanging in the balance. The chief approached, his gaze fixed on the rancher, and the rancher felt the weight of that stare, as if it were a physical force pressing against him. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat loud in his ears. The girls, sensing the tension, held onto him tighter, their small hands trembling. The rancher swallowed, trying to keep his own fear in check. He knew that everything he had done up to this moment, the rescue, the careful guidance, the calm reassurance, would be judged in the coming moments. Finally, the chief spoke, his voice low but resonant, carrying a weight that demanded attention. Though the rancher could not understand the language fully, the tone was clear. He was being assessed, measured, and questioned. The girls stepped forward, their voices weaving together in a frantic, emotional explanation. gesturing toward the rancher, pleading for understanding. Every gesture, every word seemed to bridge the gap between the worlds of the rancher and the tribe. The rancher nodded, trying to convey his intentions without words, showing that he had acted only to protect, never to interfere. Sweat trickled down his back, not from the heat but from the tension that gripped him. He could feel the scrutiny of dozens of eyes, each one seeking to discern the truth. The chief stopped, studied him in silence, and for a long moment nothing happened. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation. Then slowly the chief gestured for the girls to come forward. Relief surged through the rancher's chest, though he remained wary. This was only the first step. The judgment was not yet complete, and he had no way of knowing what the next moments would bring. The girls ran to their father, clinging to him, their voices a mixture of relief and joy. The rancher stood back, giving them space, watching the interaction with a mix of hope and anxiety. He understood that their reunion was a crucial part of the chief's assessment. The children's words, their evident gratitude, spoke volumes, softening the hard edges of suspicion. The rancher allowed himself a moment of quiet pride, realizing that the simple act of saving lives had created a bond strong enough to transcend fear and mistrust. As the sun disappeared completely beyond the horizon, the rancher remained standing, waiting for the chief's decision. The camp was quiet now, the fires flickering, casting long shadows that danced across the plains. He could sense the chief's presence, his authority unwavering. And in that silence, a new chapter was poised to begin, one that would test courage, trust, and the fragile threads that connect strangers in moments of shared humanity. The night had fallen over the plains, leaving the rancher and the two girls bathed in the soft silver glow of the moon. The firelight from the distant camp flickered and danced, casting long shadows that stretched across the uneven ground. The air had cooled considerably, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush, pine, and the earthy aroma of the desert settling after a long day. Crickets chirped intermittently, punctuating the silence, while the occasional howl of a distant coyote reminded the rancher that the wilderness was never truly still. Every sense in his body was alert, every muscle coiled and ready. Yet nothing compared to the tension that tightened his chest as he approached the heart of the camp. The older sister's grip on his arm was firm, almost desperate, and he could feel the trembling in her small hand. The younger one clung to his side, hiding her face against his jacket. Their trust in him was evident yet fragile, like the thin line of ice over a river in spring, strong enough to hold for a moment, but delicate enough to crack under pressure. The rancher moved carefully, step by step, mindful of every rock, every shadow, every sound. He knew that one wrong move, one wrong word could turn a moment of hope into disaster. As they drew closer, figures around the fire paused, their movements slow, deliberate. Eyes glinted in the moonlight, sharp and unyielding, assessing him. The rancher's heart raced. He had faced danger before, certainly, but this was different. Here, every instinct, every decision, every gesture mattered more than life or death alone. The weight of judgment hung heavy in the night air. He could see bows and arrows resting lightly in hands and the faint glint of knives on belts and at hips. These were people whose survival depended on vigilance, on courage, and on reading the intentions of strangers with piercing accuracy. From the far side of the camp, the chief emerged, moving slowly yet with undeniable authority. Every step he took was deliberate, each movement commanding attention without a single word. The rancher instinctively straightened, feeling the gravity of the moment pressing down on him like the vast weight of the night sky. He had heard stories of the chief, how wise and fierce he was, how every decision he made shaped the lives of the tribe. Now, standing mere feet away, the rancher could see the truth in those stories. The chief's eyes were like two dark pools, observing, analyzing, searching for honesty and intent. The girls stepped forward, their voices rising in a chorus of urgent words that the rancher could not understand. Yet the tone and emotion were unmistakable. They gestured wildly, pointing toward him, pleading with every gesture, every syllable. Their eyes, wide with hope, reflected a trust in him that he had earned through sheer courage and instinct. The rancher nodded, trying to convey the truth of his intentions without speaking a word. His hands were open, palms visible, a universal sign of peace. He lowered himself slightly in a gesture of respect, knowing that submission to a higher authority often spoke louder than words. The chief stopped several feet away, studying the rancher in silence. Every detail was scrutinized, the way he held himself, the way his eyes met the chief's gaze, the subtle movements of his body. The rancher felt as though the chief could see straight into him, peeling away layers of pretense, stripping him bare to his intentions, his courage, his humanity. It was an uncomfortable yet necessary process, and the rancher held his breath, willing himself to remain calm under the intensity of that gaze. Time seemed to stretch, the world narrowing to the small circle of firelight around them. The girls' voices continued, overlapping, pleading, explaining. The rancher felt the urgency in their tone, the way their words wove a story of fear, survival, and trust. He could see the chief's eyes soften just slightly as the story unfolded through their expressions and gestures. The tension in the air was palpable, a taut string ready to snap at any moment. Yet there was also a sense of understanding beginning to take root, a recognition of courage, of selflessness, of the rare act of risking one's own life for others. Finally, the chief spoke. The rancher did not understand the words, but the authority, the weight, and the measured cadence were clear. It was a voice that commanded attention and respect, a voice that carried the weight of experience and judgment. The camp fell silent, every figure holding still, listening, waiting for the verdict. The rancher's heart raced, every beat echoing in his ears, his pulse a drum of anticipation. He had no way of knowing what the chief would decide. Punishment? Acceptance? Trust? Danger? Each possibility churned in his mind like a storm. The chief's eyes never left him as he gestured for the girls to come closer. Relief surged through the rancher, though he remained cautious. The children ran to their father, clinging to him, speaking in rapid, emotional tones that the rancher could not decipher. Their faces shone with gratitude and relief, tears glistening in the firelight. The chief observed, silent, the weight of judgment still upon him. The rancher understood that this moment, the reunion of father and daughters, was a crucial part of the assessment. The chief would judge not just the act, but the effect, the intentions, the consequences. Minutes passed in tense silence. The rancher remained still, hands still open, body relaxed yet poised, a living testament to patience under scrutiny. The camp watched, the flickering firelight reflecting off faces, showing curiosity, caution, and slowly, a hint of respect. The rancher could feel a shift, subtle but undeniable, a change in the atmosphere, a softening of the tension, a quiet acknowledgement of bravery. The chief stepped closer, his eyes locking onto the rancher's again. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The rancher could see the measure of him in that gaze, the weighing of character, the recognition of courage, the understanding of risk, taken without expectation of reward. It was a look that could chill a man to the bone, yet here, under the moon and firelight, it carried a silent promise that acts of selflessness would not go unnoticed, that bravery had its own language, one understood across boundaries and cultures. Then slowly the chief nodded. It was a subtle motion, but in it was the weight of judgment, the seal of acceptance. The camp exhaled collectively, tension dissolving into quiet acknowledgement. The rancher felt a weight lift from his shoulders, relief mingling with awe. He realized in that moment that his actions had transcended fear and misunderstanding. He had risked his life for the daughters of a proud tribe, and in doing so, had earned the recognition of a man whose respect was hard-won and deeply meaningful. The girls clung to their father, chattering in soft, excited tones, their expressions radiant with joy and relief. The rancher stepped back, giving them space, allowing the reunion to unfold naturally. He watched the chief, understanding that this moment was more than forgiveness. It was recognition, respect, and an invitation into a world he had never known. The chief spoke again, slowly, with deliberate emphasis, and though the rancher could not understand the language, he understood the tone, acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps even gratitude. The night deepened around them, stars emerging in a scattered canopy overhead, the firelight flickering and dancing across the camp. The rancher felt a profound sense of humility. He had acted out of instinct, out of humanity, without thought of reward. Yet here was the result: trust, respect, and the beginning of a connection that could span worlds. He realized that courage was not measured in battles fought alone, but in moments when one chose to protect the vulnerable, to stand up against fear, and to act with integrity despite uncertainty. As the chief returned to the center of the camp, signaling the end of the judgment, the rancher took a deep breath, letting the tension seep from his body. He looked at the girls, their faces illuminated by the fire, and knew that his life had changed irrevocably. The bond forged in those perilous hours was unbreakable, a thread that connected them across language, culture, and circumstance. He had entered their world as an outsider, a stranger, yet through an act of courage, he had become something more, a protector, an ally, and a trusted figure in the lives of two children and the tribe that cared for them. He spent the rest of the night near the camp's edge, observing, listening, and learning. The tribe's life unfolded before him in small, subtle ways. The careful tending of fires, the whispered conversations in the dark, the rhythmic movements of people at work and play. Each observation deepened his understanding and respect for their culture, their discipline, and their resilience. And though sleep came sparingly, it was filled with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had acted rightly, who had faced uncertainty with courage, and who had been rewarded with trust and acceptance. By the first light of dawn, the rancher felt a shift within himself. The night had been a crucible, testing his resolve, his intentions, and his courage. He had emerged not unscathed, for the memory of the fear and uncertainty lingered but transformed, his purpose renewed. He understood that this was only the beginning, that the bonds he had forged, the trust he had earned, and the lives he had touched would ripple outward, shaping events in ways he could not yet imagine. And as the sun rose, casting its golden light across the plains, the rancher knew that his path was forever entwined with the tribe, the two sisters, and the quiet, powerful wisdom of their chief. The dawn broke gently over the plains, spilling pale golden light across the rolling hills, the scrub, and the distant mountains. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of sage and morning dew, a stark contrast to the heat and tension of the previous day. The rancher awoke near the edge of the Apache camp, the two girls sleeping peacefully beside him, their small forms curled under a shared blanket. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to breathe fully, the tension of fear and uncertainty finally giving way to cautious relief. The camp itself was slowly stirring to life. Figures emerged from tents, their movements deliberate and purposeful. Fires were stoked, smoke curling upward, carrying the smell of wood and breakfast over the plains. Children ran in small clusters, laughing and chasing one another, their voices light and carefree. The rancher watched quietly, taking in the rhythm of the camp's life, feeling an unfamiliar but comforting sense of belonging wash over him. He realized that in saving the two sisters, he had been granted an entry into a world that was rich, complex, and profoundly human, a world he had never known but now deeply respected. The girls stirred as the morning light touched their faces. The younger one blinked sleepily, then clung instinctively to the rancher, her small arms wrapping around him. The older sister smiled, brushing her tangled hair from her face, and whispered words he could not understand. Yet the tone, the warmth, and the emotion were unmistakable. Gratitude, trust, and joy. He nodded, returning the silent communication, understanding perfectly without the need for translation. The bond forged in the ravine and solidified in the night had grown even stronger in the quiet intimacy of dawn. The chief appeared shortly thereafter, moving with the same calm authority that had marked him the previous evening. His presence carried weight, but there was no anger, no tension, only measured observation and quiet approval. The rancher straightened immediately, offering a small bow of respect. The chief's eyes softened briefly, acknowledging the courage and integrity the rancher had displayed. Then, with deliberate motion, he gestured for the rancher to follow him into the center of the camp. The rancher hesitated for a fraction of a second, aware that every step he took was laden with meaning, but the girl's expectant glances urged him forward. As he walked among the gathered members of the tribe, he realized that he was no longer an outsider in the same way. The children's presence and their. By mid-afternoon, the chief approached him once more. This time the gesture was clear, deliberate, an invitation to participate, to be present not merely as an observer, but as a valued member of the tribe, at least in spirit, if not in blood. The rancher's chest tightened with emotion. He had come into this world as an outsider, armed only with instinct and courage, and now he was being welcomed, respected, and entrusted. It was a moment that transcended fear, culture, and expectation, a moment in which humanity and bravery had bridged a divide wider than any canyon in the plains. The rancher spent the following days integrating into the rhythm of the camp, small but meaningful acts of participation reinforcing the trust he had earned. He helped the children gather water from a nearby stream, repaired fences for the livestock, and assisted elders with chores requiring his physical strength. In every action there was reciprocity. He offered his labor, his protection, his care. The tribe offered acceptance, guidance, and subtle mentorship. Each day deepened his understanding, not only of the people he had saved, but of himself, of what courage, humility, and compassion truly meant when tested under fire. Evenings were the most profound. Gathered around fires, stories were shared. Stories of ancestors, of bravery, of survival and wisdom passed from one generation to the next. The rancher listened, absorbing lessons he had never known, feeling the weight of tradition and the grace of experience. The two sisters often nestled close, their voices recounting their own adventures and discoveries, their laughter a balm to the memory of fear. Slowly he realized that this was what he had been searching for all along: connection, purpose, and the quiet satisfaction that came from protecting and nurturing life beyond oneself. Weeks passed, and the rancher found himself irrevocably changed. The initial fear of judgment, of rejection, of misunderstanding had given way to gratitude, belonging, and profound respect. The chief had observed him carefully, continuing to test his patience, his resolve, and his integrity. Yet each interaction strengthened the bond. The girls flourished under the guidance of both their father and the rancher. Their lives brightened not only by survival, but by the love and protection he had provided. He had become not merely a savior, but a mentor, a friend, and a fixture in their world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in rich hues of orange and purple, the rancher stood on a small hill overlooking the camp. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying whispers of the past, the present, and the future. He thought of the ravine, of the moment he had risked everything to save two small lives, and he realized that in that instant, he had not only altered their fate, but his own. Life had offered him a gift, the chance to connect, to serve, and to belong. The world was vast, full of danger and beauty alike, yet he had discovered the enduring power of courage, compassion, and trust. The chief approached silently, placing a firm hand on the rancher's shoulder. In that simple gesture there was acknowledgement, acceptance, and respect. Words were unnecessary. The bond had been forged and solidified through actions, through shared experience, and through the unspoken understanding that true bravery transcends fear, culture, and circumstance. The girls ran to them, their laughter ringing clear across the plains, a reminder of lives saved and future secured. As night fell, the rancher sat by the fire with the girls, watching the stars emerge one by one. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from the scorching plains to the perilous ravine to the judgment of the chief, and finally, to this moment of quiet fulfillment. He understood now that life's most profound victories were not measured in wealth, power, or recognition, but in the lives touched, the bonds forged, and the courage to act rightly when the world demanded it most. And so, the rancher's life was forever changed. What had begun as a simple act of instinctive bravery had blossomed into something far greater: trust, respect, and an unbreakable connection to a family, a tribe, and a way of life that would forever shape his heart. In saving two young sisters, he had discovered his own humanity, his own strength, and the quiet, enduring truth that courage, true courage, is measured not by the battles we fight alone, but by the lives we protect and the love we give without expectation in return. The plains stretched endlessly before him, golden in the morning light, filled with promise, challenges, and life, and the rancher knew without question that he would never walk them alone again. The sun rose slowly over the plains, its light spilling across the horizon like molten gold, and the rancher felt a deep, unshakable sense of purpose for the first time in years. The previous days, filled with peril, fear, and uncertainty, had given way to a rhythm that felt almost natural. A rhythm dictated not by routine alone, but by responsibility, connection, and trust. The two sisters, now more comfortable and confident, ran through the camp with unrestrained laughter, their feet kicking up clouds of dust that glittered in the morning light. The rancher watched them, a quiet smile on his face, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a warmth born of knowing that his actions had rippled far beyond what he had imagined. The chief had called him to meet privately after breakfast, a gesture that filled the rancher with a mix of anticipation and respect. Walking alongside the fire-dappled paths of the camp, He noticed the quiet ways the tribe had begun to accept him. Nods from elders, greetings from hunters returning with game, and smiles from children who had once regarded him with suspicion. The chief's movements were calm, deliberate, and measured. When they reached a shaded area near the central fire, the chief gestured for him to sit. The rancher obeyed, aware that this moment was significant. Without words, the chief began a series of gestures and subtle expressions, explaining in his language what had been decided. The rancher watched intently, trying to follow the rhythm of speech, the rise and fall of tone, the shifts in expression. Slowly, the meaning became clear. The chief acknowledged his bravery, his selflessness, and his respect for the tribe's people. More than that, he was being offered a role, not as a full member of the tribe by blood, but as a guardian, a mentor, and a trusted ally. The gesture carried immense weight, an honor that could only be earned through courage, integrity, and patience. Over the next few days, the rancher began learning more deeply about the tribe's way of life. Each morning, he assisted in tasks both mundane and vital, tending livestock, repairing tools, and helping gather water from the streams that meandered through the plains. He learned how to track small animals, recognizing the subtle signs of movement in the soil and vegetation. He discovered the intricate knowledge embedded in the tribe's oral history, stories of ancestors whose wisdom and courage shaped the land. And in every task, he felt the quiet approval of the chief, whose presence was both a guide and a measure of responsibility. The sisters flourished under his guidance and the nurturing care of their father. The older one, curious and bright, often shadowed him during his work, asking questions about the land, the animals, and the stars. Her voice, soft yet persistent, reminded him of the innocence and curiosity that had inspired his first act of courage. The younger one was more reserved but no less perceptive, her trust growing steadily as she learned that he would always protect her. Together, the three formed a small circle of safety and companionship, a bond forged in peril but strengthened in daily life. Evenings were a time of learning and reflection. Gathered around the fires that dotted the camp, the rancher absorbed stories from the elders, lessons that carried the weight of generations. Tales of survival, courage, and wisdom unfolded in their own rhythm, each story layered with meaning. The rancher listened, captivated, understanding that the lessons were not just historical. They were living instructions for navigating the challenges of life. In turn, he shared some of his own experiences, stories of distant lands, of cattle drives, storms survived, and nights spent alone in the wilderness. The tribe listened with rapt attention, appreciating the honesty and humility in his words. As weeks passed, the rancher began to feel a profound transformation within himself. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped him in the ravine were now replaced by confidence and purpose. He understood that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act rightly despite it. He realized that his life had been expanded not by wealth or power, but by trust, friendship, and the bonds he had forged with those who depended on him. The tribe had given him acceptance, yes, but he had also given himself something deeper, a sense of belonging and meaning he had never known. Occasionally, he was called upon to help mediate disputes within the tribe, using his perspective as an outsider to offer guidance without overstepping. His judgments were cautious and measured, informed by both instinct and the lessons he had learned from the chief. The people came to respect him not only for his bravery but also for his wisdom, patience, and fairness. Slowly, he began to feel as though he had become part of something larger than himself, a living thread in a tapestry of community, culture, and survival. One day, while helping track game for the tribe, the rancher noticed signs that something was amiss: broken branches, disturbed earth, and the faint echo of distant voices that did not belong to the camp. His instincts, honed over years of working alone on the plains, flared. He signaled to the chief, who approached silently, and together they investigated. It became clear that a group of outsiders had entered the territory, curious and unaware of the tribe's presence. The rancher's calm confidence and knowledge of the land proved invaluable, guiding the chief in handling the situation with tact, avoiding conflict, and ensuring the safety of the camp. The chief's nod of approval afterward spoke volumes. The rancher had proven himself not only in courage but in wisdom and diplomacy. The sisters watched these events unfold with awe and pride, They had come to see him not merely as a protector but as a guide, a mentor, and a part of their extended family. The older one began shadowing him during morning tasks, learning to track animals, recognize edible plants, and understand the signs of changing weather. The younger one remained closer to the camp but participated in small lessons each day, her confidence growing steadily. The rancher marveled at their resilience, intelligence, and capacity for growth, understanding that his initial act of bravery had set into motion a transformation that touched not only their lives but his own. Over time, the rancher and the tribe established routines that blended their strengths and knowledge. He taught new techniques for irrigation and animal care, while the tribe shared skills honed over generations: tracking, hunting, survival tactics, and the subtle art of reading the land. Each day brought new challenges and triumphs, from storms that threatened the livestock to opportunities for cooperation with neighboring groups. In each instance, the rancher's presence became a stabilizing force, a bridge between worlds, and a testament to the enduring value of courage guided by compassion. The bond between the rancher, the sisters, and the chief deepened. The chief often invited him to sit in council, observing and offering input, his approval implicit but meaningful. These moments of inclusion reinforced the rancher's sense of responsibility, humility, and commitment. He had come to the tribe by chance, driven by instinct and compassion, and now he was entrusted with the welfare and guidance of a community he had grown to love. Each day was a reminder that actions, no matter how small or solitary, could ripple outward in ways that reshaped lives, built trust, and forged enduring connections. As seasons changed, so too did the rancher's perspective. He understood the value of patience, the strength found in community, and the profound impact of small acts of courage. The tribe thrived, and so did he, no longer a solitary figure wandering the plains, but a vital participant in the life of a people whose trust and respect he had earned. The sisters grew stronger, more confident, and endlessly curious, embodying the lessons of resilience, bravery, and compassion he had helped reinforce. Their laughter, their learning, and their presence became a source of constant inspiration, a reminder of why he had risked himself in the first place. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in vibrant hues of red, gold, and purple, the rancher stood atop a small rise overlooking the camp. The fires burned softly below, illuminating the faces of the tribe as they shared stories, prepared food, and engaged in daily tasks. He thought back to the moment in the ravine, to the desperate cries of the two sisters, and realized that everything that followed, the danger, the uncertainty, the judgment, and the eventual acceptance, had shaped him irrevocably. He had acted out of instinct, yet the results had created a lifetime of connection, trust, and meaning. The chief approached silently, placing a firm but gentle hand on the rancher's shoulder. In that single gesture there was acknowledgement, respect, and a silent promise that he was now a part of something enduring, a man whose courage and integrity had earned not only survival, but belonging. The rancher nodded, understanding fully that his journey had come full circle. He had entered a world of uncertainty and fear, and emerged as a guardian, a mentor, and a trusted friend. That night, as stars blanketed the sky, he sat with the sisters near the largest fire. Their laughter and chatter filled the air, and he realized that his life had gained depth and richness he could never have anticipated. The plains, once lonely and daunting, were now filled with connection, purpose, and a sense of home. In saving two young lives, he had discovered not only their strength and resilience, but his own capacity for courage, compassion, and enduring love. And so the rancher's story continued, not as a tale of peril and judgment alone, but as a testament to the transformative power of selfless action, the bonds forged in moments of crisis, and the profound impact that courage, guided by compassion, can have across time, generations, and worlds. He had entered the tribe as a stranger, but he would live among them as family, protector, and friend, a man forever changed, forever connected, and forever reminded that the simplest acts of bravery can echo far beyond the moment in which they are performed.